Well, hello, everybody. Gail Craft from the Empowering Process podcast. And I have with me a gentleman named Tristan Chicklowski. And Tristan is the founder of Found, Found Project, the Found Project. This is the foundation for undiscovered neurodiversity, dedicated to empowering individuals with their neurodiversities. And Kristen has an amazing story that he's going to share with us. And we're going to talk a little bit about less than a grain of sand. So, everybody, welcome. Join me in welcoming Tristan. So, welcome, Tristan. How are you today?
It is a beautiful day in New England. It's snowy, cloudy, slushy, haily.
And I just shoveled ice, not snow. So, I want to say you sent me a few notes in registering for us to do this, and one of the things that you said was this comment about less than a grain of for our emotions, and I was fascinated by that. So hopefully we get to that. I want to start off though with you have this beautiful picture of the brain shooting off energy in the background, and that's what drew me to you in the first place. Was, we're both like fascinated with how this thing works because it is just a radio antenna, right? And for everyone it is different. So let's talk a little bit about what is currently being labeled as neurodiversity. I don't think any of us are diverse because I believe all of us are different. There is no normal for anybody. but but there are spectrums, and you are on a spectrum. So let's talk a little bit about how you even discovered that you were different.
So even when I hear the word spectrum, I like to think of it more as a guitar. There are only 5 strings on a guitar, so the variables are limited, but you can create an infinite amount of music. In music, spectrum and music don't seem to touch each other, so I think it's more 5 strings with an infinite amount of possibilities.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. Okay.
I appreciate gradients though. I think it's very important to know where something starts and stops. I think a lot of what we struggle a lot with now is we want to make all objective things very subjective, and we lose the anchor of objectivity in that. And without some grounded reality and, for lack of a better word, truth, it is very easy to get lost like a compass that doesn't point north all the time. And we want to feel like it's north and refuse to acknowledge that it might be northeast or maybe even south. And I think that that rejection of like objectivity because it doesn't feel right to our subjectiveness is a core issue from a lot of our suffering in today's age.
I love that perspective. And for me, I have come to terms with that my true north is maybe my true north today, but it may not be tomorrow. And that's okay.
It we all know that nothing is forever, and the now is probably the shortest period of time. If you could ever measure one, the present's the most instantaneous. However, there's something emotional about decisions that feel like forever because a decision has finality. Having a mindful self-awareness that I have to decide something now, and I need to understand that although that feels infinite, I just have to agree to not just change my mind the second I feel differently. And after a while, we have a prefrontal cortex. We have the ability to gather data, organize it, and then actually have a good thought process against it. And I think in that 3-step process of like, I have to decide so I can actually measure. If every time you go to measure your board is a different board, how can you ever really know what's happening? And then that decision of like, look at this is what north is, just so I can calibrate. I can change it 2 weeks from now. But tomorrow I can't say, well, this is now north. And the next day, well, this is now north. And if you're unfortunate and you will even argue and say it was the same north every day, those are the real people who are stuck in a cage. because they can't even accept because of the pain of feeling wrong, because objectively no one wants to, and subjectively you don't have to. Mental jumping jacks. Our brain answers whatever question we want to give it, and if the question always says, I don't want to feel wrong in this answer, that's what the universe and your mind are going to facilitate, because it knows everything. It knows everything you know, and it can curate the data perfectly so you'll never feel wrong. But we have to reflect. We have to look at what objectively is true. I know.
And for me, here's where there's perspective. What is wrong is just an opinion, a judgment, an evaluation, right? I go by what resonates. If I can have my tuning, I'm pointing to my head, anyone who's just listening, if I can make sure my tuning apparatus, the whole apparatus, is in as good alignment as I can get it today, then I know that my resonance, my vibration, my frequency that I'm picking up is the perfect one for me right now. And because I grow that frequency, I'm going to change the station. And that's okay. Just not right now. I want to listen to the music right now.
And being aware of that and knowing when it's old or when it's not benefiting you. There are many things that feel good enough to not move, but they'll never make you feel like you could do more.
Right. So yeah, I love talking with you, Tristan. I love your not only perspective, but the way that you present your perspective, which is so different. And the reason why folks that are listening, this is so beautiful, is we all hear differently and we hear things differently at different times. So I don't want you to always hear what I have to say. Like, who am I, right, to judge anything? I mean, in your life, I'm nobody. So I want to present different perspectives from people who have had different experiences and maybe similar to some of the things that you've gone through. Right. And so I have to say something very interesting because you came to mind over the last few days for me. So, I am a little ADHD and very dyslexic. And I joined a new group who want me to facilitate one of their programs. I mean, I'm getting very integrated into the group. And it's a beautiful thing. The universe is giving me everything that I asked for, and I thank you. However, I have so many text messages now of look at this, go here, go there, do this, do. I'm overwhelmed and I'm frozen into doing nothing because it's too much information. I've tried to organize it because I have to organize things when that happens. And I can't even organize it. That's how much information was dumped. And so I'm like, I'm just going to take one baby step every day about understanding what's going on in that group today. Okay, that's all I can do because that's all I can do. And that is because of my ADHD. I can't hold on long enough, right? To process what's going on. And my dyslexia, with that much information, can't organize it.
Are you against me giving you what has been the most useful advice for people to just, I believe everything can be made easier. You said, I can't do this, and this is how I work. So how do I facilitate myself better?
Right.
I like to live in a physical world, but digital often is required. So if you don't have a whiteboard, or if you don't have a glass window that dry erase works on too, a sheet of paper would work fine, but Post-its are kind of big. And I just like Post-its because you can visually move them around. You can go 1, 2, 3, or you can quadrant them, or, if it's 9, you can have a 3. Visually, you can organize your mind through space, and Post-its allow you to not rewrite a lot. So it's just efficiency. I think when you're bored, if you took a time to go through that and not so much try to understand it, but watch for how it's whatting it. The part of the back of our brain, what's before, there's levels of what. When you see a chair, you know it's something you can sit on before you know it's a chair or a stool or a couch or a table. The applicable thing of what it is irrelevant in that first whatting. And you're trying to get to a level 3 what, and that is very difficult because there's so many questions, and you know that there's a lot of connecting things that would be so valuable. And that is where, you're using the decimals way deep, and that's overwhelming because we got to get the hours before we can ever talk about the seconds. And that's and if you took a little bit of time and just, oh,
Yeah.
this is a what that and it doesn't matter how you what it, you don't have to pre-reference. It can be any kind of qualia of what, but stick in the, oh, this is all about X. Oh, this is all about that. And it's even fine if things cross. What matters is that you have a predefined set of what's when you're reviewing it, and you're letting your creative mind give you what it needs. And there's no wrong answer, because these can be, you might have a level 3 what and a level 1 what. Awesome. That is unimportant right now. You just know that they're important to what you're doing. And then when you're going through it, be very quick to contrast. Don't leave yourself without an arrow. Oh, this is what that is. Awesome. Check. And there's any way you can put a secondary organization system, but pull back. Do not try to go into the middle of the forest and decide that you are going to be a biologist. Look at it from the 30,000-foot view and say, oh, I see plants, I see trees, I see animals, I see interactions. Oh, I see colors. Oh, I see temperatures. Any what aspect of that, allow your mind, and because of your dyslexia, you're going to find that there are weird wirings that actually jump to very weird, narrow 45 degrees, maybe even like a 57-degree cut. And it would never make sense why that was one of your whats, but you're going to find that a lot of the things that you really needed to know and integrate, that was a fulcrum to bigger whats. Because often those second and third will connect to a lot of them because of context, and reality happens in this. But if you pull back to your what, spend 15 minutes doing it, it will be the best thing you can do for your mind to enjoy the next step. Now it will become, now it's fun. What is this? Becomes an amazing game.
What's interesting. So here's the what. The first thing I did was try to organize it that way on a Word document, just like throw things out there. And that didn't
super
work.
hard.
That didn't work.
Too much organizing.
Then I tried
too much organizing.
Right. Then I tried a spreadsheet, and that was even worse. So
now it's funny. You're like, oh, I can't keep going up and down, so I'm going to make it 3D space. The problem is still, I'm trying to organize. I'm not trying to capture and orientate. Organization is a level 3. You need to know what all your stuff is, where it goes, and then what the house is. You can't be picking stuff up and deciding the house at the same time. They're very different parts.
Yeah. So the third attempt I'm planning on making is mind mapping. Mind mapping works for me because I do like what you said. Right. And sometimes, well, that doesn't fit here. Let me move it here. Oh, wait a minute. It fits both places, depending on the situation. So mind mapping actually does work for me.
It's very, very similar. So I will let you know what is the small difference. With mind mapping, you are going to start with an unspecific directive. And you can understand the blank page without any, like, I'm not disagreeing with mind mapping, but whatever you do first or second, you are immediately building to a specific area. So whatifying, even before you mind map, have those whats separately, and they will build value over time. But if you pick something, the dopamine attachment to that and the neurons are wired together, are going to fire together. And just because your wiring allows for interesting firings doesn't mean that it doesn't still work that way when it comes to building something. So you can
I'll try the
really
stickies. I'll try the stickies first.
Go immediately to mind mapping. Switch over there once you've got it quantified.
And so listen to this, guys. This is going to blow your mind. Back in the day when I used to be program manager for large organizations, I'd bring senior leadership in, and they would all have stickies beside them. And I would say, in the perfect world, what is it that you want to see? And they would write it down, and they'd have their little stickies and write them down. And then I would say, okay, now let's just throw them on the wall. And we would throw them on the wall I let them throw it on the wall any way they would want. Then we would put it into affinities. So that's exactly what you're talking about. right? And then from there, I would say, so now we said you have all the money in the world, we have no technical constrictions, we have all the resources, but that's not the real world. So out of this, what are we trying to achieve and how can we get there? So we still achieve the goal, but just not the perfect world. Just as good as we can get. Anyway, so it's interesting. I just did that organically. And so I stopped. It's time to pick it up again because it worked for me.
Practicing what we preach is one of the most difficult things because it's less interesting than something new.
Yeah.
That's all.
And so this is why Tristan is here, because his approach to things are so totally different than my approach to things. And it works, as does mine, but his is a brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So let's talk about how you got here.
Sure. One, I call it the no dopamine model, and I know I'm cheating the game, but I figured out the easiest way to work ourselves through what ended up becoming my foundation. Me and my business partner, effectively my soulmate, someone I met through my wife 10 years ago while working, we had started just BSing because I like to do stuff and he likes to do stuff. And we start getting deep into mindfulness conversations because I was born with severe ADHD, and for circumstantial reasons, I was not put on Ritalin, and I was left pretty much unfettered. Now, in a blue state, you would imagine that they would have really good help for special needs. They have very strong restrictions, and unfortunately, the system pretty much said to make sure you could read, we're going to sacrifice what you're good at. And that was very difficult because it affected my confidence through my entire life. And in my entire life, I wasn't aware of this, but my ability to be knowledgeable, my ability to recall information, and my ability to really formulate information on the fly was directly correlated to my confidence. I'm also a high neurotic, and I really don't like being wrong. It stems from a feeling of confusion that I don't want in me, and I will do anything to not be confused. And if you know what's right, you can decipher everything from there or just do what that is, and you don't have to think about it at all. So it has always been a core of, please calm this mind down. I did not realize that people don't hear 1,000 words in their head every day, all the time. I did not know that people don't have a thought followed by 17 answers of varying levels of quality and kindness. And I'm not referring to kindness, it just sounds better using that as the medium, but there's a duality to kindness as well. So when I meet Dustin, now I'm already financially independent. My wife is happy. I'm finding basically a great partner. I've always had codependency like my mother, and I've always worked good in duels. So I had left friends. But we won't, if we have time, we can kind of get into that. But it's important that once you realize how you work, if you let people know what it cost on you for their relationship, and they are unable, or I don't like ever putting negative intent, so I don't want to say unwilling. I believe it's always unable, because if it was easy, they would, because I don't think that it's not a measurement of whether they cared or not. That's not what it is, and you can't associate that. But I needed a different way of being held and handled, and they couldn't, so I left them. And these were people that I had known for a decade, and that was when I was 16. So it was more than a third, it was more than half of my life when I just got rid of the two people who were my closest friends and started from zero. 2 years later, we meet. Now, to zoom in over the course of the year, I talked a little bit about having ADHD, but it's never been acknowledged in my life. I'm just saying I didn't know people thought differently, and now I'm living my whole life. We're all self-centered. We forget that no one thinks the same. And if you're ever thinking about someone else, know that two things are happening. You're using them as yourself, and you're giving them ill intent. You're always saying, I can't believe why they did that, but you're thinking exactly, it's messed up. But if you know that, that's the perfect first version. You can have any first version. You just need a version of the reality, and from there you can update it. If you're updating it on the fly, again, either create or organize. Do not do both, because you can't pull out. Dustin and I start talking, and he's claiming he doesn't feel things. And by that, like jealousy, anger, he is so far on the Asperger's spectrum. I try to let people know that Like, chairs. Chair, does that have a feeling in you, like a sensation associated with it? Maybe like a utility feeling or like nothing. Like it could be important, but it isn't. What about cats? Do cats have a different feeling in you?
Mhm.
What about your grandchildren? Does that have a different, this that has a salient in your mind? I can say these things in the whatness of that are very different. Now, coworkers, best friend, acquaintances from long ago, these are all people, and every one of them have a feeling. Dustin doesn't feel people. He can't feel people. They don't do anything. There's no association with that life being life any more than an animal would be, with the exception of his children, his
Mhm.
parents, and his grandparents. Now, he can't not feel for them, which, like never being wet, water can sting. So that is a big reason why it can be so difficult for people on the spectrum to enjoy their feelings, because they're always strong and they're never really, I'm always wet. It's easy. I might not like it, but it's familiar. And in that, pain that's not familiar is more painful. And over the course of 6 or 7 months, we have really long conversations where he's like, "Oh no, I don't feel that. I'm like, I don't know what you're wrong." And just objectively arguing with him verbally, trying to say, where's the misunderstanding? You say a sentence, I say a sentence. Okay, here's a new example. Do it again, again. And for some level of reason, he tolerated this complete assault on what he was calling his reality and my sheer disagreement and me requiring him to validate it to me. How rude. However, the level of knowledge and understanding that we gained, because on his side, he has spent his entire life with everyone around him having this song that's constantly playing and they're dancing and he doesn't get it. He knows they react to it. He knows they're different every day. These people that don't feel like anything, he doesn't have kids right now. This is high school. And when you ask him a chair or a person, they feel no feeling, but honestly, for him, it's all about utility. So objectively, a chair has more value to him than any human being that walks this earth, because in his life, a chair has always been able to sit, and 9 times out of 10, a human with their emotions has ruined his life because they either misunderstood him or he's just really, really intelligent. And that can be a teacher. No one likes that. No one likes when you have a 160 IQ and you don't understand. But he also didn't realize why people weren't. He didn't know why am I hearing this in school? I get it. And now the teacher keeps repeating it. And these people to the left and right of me seem like they didn't hear it. She said, and for him, completely confused, not understanding why at 8 years old, this is his experience. And so over the course of 2 years, we had realized that everything that's ever been done in regards to the labeling and the DSM 3 through 5 have all been an outside observer, not acknowledging, not having any self-awareness of themselves, never mind the fact that we think through ourselves. So they're unconsciously measuring someone with their unmeasured self against a set of rules to someone who also doesn't have the ability to there's so much blank black holes in this whole process, and we discovered them. And our foundation sole goal is like, I'm not telling you this is your height. I'm telling you this is a ruler and here are the inches. Please go use it and come back. And from there we can talk about just, my philosophy gets real boring because my advice follows the same chunking. It's always no dopamine, and then we just organize from there. But it's always watching. Watching is the easiest thing you can do. Your brain's actively doing it. You're trying to capture and make something with it. Just try to capture it for a couple hours. And here's the thing you got to appreciate. You never have to think about it again. You never have to remember it again. And in fact, if it's on the wall, you now can just look at it, and your consciousness knows this information without you having to say it in your head. That means you can hold on to your question and just stare at that wall, and you can patiently wait for your subconscious to give you the answer. But you don't know that. And there's no
And your
way you will.
subconscious will give you the answer.
Well, it has to. It's what you're doing right now. If your
Yeah.
intent is saying, I want this, and I think a lot of people don't know, and it's something else, because Dustin is so intelligent, I've systematically taken every Asperger's trick on how to do things good and figured out what was really hard about them, because he doesn't associate with anything, decisions are very easy. There's no dopamine involved. How do I get it
There's no
done?
energy, right, right.
Yes.
With there's
Yeah.
no emotions. I have to tell you that this is really interesting. So my experience in school, right? When I finally realized, being dyslexic, how to play the game, right? I could listen and I would make notes with what was going on in the teaching of that day. And if you looked at my notes, they would make no sense to anybody, because it'd be circles and arrows and figurines and whatever, right? And half words, if that. And that was it. I was done. And the teacher would be going on and on. So now I'm bored. So I'm going to start talking. And my father would say, how can you get A's and have a D in conduct? Because I get it, and you're going on, and I don't want to hear you anymore. So I'm going to go entertain myself in another way. Right. And that did stop. It still doesn't stop. I mean,
It is our nature. It is our
okay.
nature. That's why I don't like, I think we should define it as quickly as possible, because you can just facilitate what you are better.
Yeah.
My whole life work has been trying to find people who have a little bit of self-awareness to give me maybe a pattern I don't know. I have not created a single pattern. I have only discovered them through sheer exhaustive effort. My brain is incessant. It wants to know and it won't quit. And because I'm not very intelligent, it takes a while to get to understand things, but it's the cheat code for me being able to make things understandable. People constantly say, Tristan, I don't understand how you can just make everything so easy to understand. And I try to tell them with all honesty, because it took me forever to grasp it, and I don't want you to have to put that work in. That's it. And I know what was actually important, because there, what I need to know about something to understand it, there's a difference between knowing and understanding. And when I know I don't know anything, I don't forget, I'm just questioning it. Okay, I've hated the school book in mitochondria where it said this is the powerhouse of the cell. I spent 7 years of my life learning about digestion, mitochondria, and biochemistry until I felt like I understood what that meant. As a side effect, I can translate things to very, very comprehensible levels because I desperately just want someone to understand, so that way we can move forward. Because in the foundation, all we deal with is very sensitive subjects. It's all touchy. Self-awareness is not a high five of your superpowers. At best, you're saying, wow, look at how smart you are that you were able to make a bridge over this hole. We have to acknowledge that there's a hole there because you're saying there's a path. Let's try not using the bridge and see if you can do it. And that just hurts.
Right.
Hence, mindfulness is what's most important, because you cannot think you are yourself. I've thought long and hard, am I ADHD or do I have ADHD? And the conclusion that I have come to is those are both useful thought experiments for me to better figure out how to utilize myself. It doesn't matter. We just seem to want to categorize and figure out what we are, just with the meaning of life. There is no specific meaning other than you picking one, and that requires dopamine. But there's a weird thing.
And none of it matters. Right.
So I agree. However, my duality always, that will require a nihilism. It can only matter if we allow it to. So there's a huge argument, like you can just not care and this solves all your problems. But if nothing matters, we'll never do anything. And that's why a lot of it, I live in a duality. Like, when you were
We
saying,
all
well,
do.
yes,
We all do.
but few people, no, I think people acknowledge there's a duality and they do not live in it. They live on the side that makes them comfortable or the side that their nature controls. And even for me, when earlier you had mentioned that something had the connotation of wrong, and then all of your statements were against, kind of aside of that, it left no mindful awareness of like, let's be objective about how, like, what if it was, let's not say it's wrong and now just acknowledge the truth of nature, because the moral value of wrong pollutes our intention and the flavor. And that's where we get lost in that, I agree it is wrong, but there is no light without dark. And we can't acknowledge truths about ourselves if they are just covered with things that emotionally don't feel good. And I honestly don't think you can address the shadow while associating with it with a clean mind, because it's polluting itself. I do not be my werewolf while I'm watching my werewolf. I just need to know how it works, so that way when it is in control, how can I best guide it? Because no one holds onto the steering wheel 100% of the time. Most people don't even know that they are holding onto a steering wheel.
Yeah.
I'm
And
trying,
so let me just, and I love the
please.
steering wheel because that actually came up in another interview this year. So the dark, I want to talk about the darkness because that's where I love to play, right? That's where I want my clients who are in the darkness. I want them to show up, right? Because that is where I say, let's bring the darkness and give it a seat at the table. Stop trying to shine the light on it. Stop trying to understand it. Stop trying to categorize it. Stop trying to blame it. All of these things that coaches tell you to do. I don't want you to do anymore because that's why it's hurting you. It's just there to provide data.
I'm very pragmatic about our nature. So when I have a table, their uses are always pragmatic. So all of my strengths come from my shadow. My intelligence is very mean. I'm very spiteful. I'm a very bad loser. And honestly, I have no problem personally attacking someone if we're just saying words and making people feel. I have no holds bar. I believe I'm a First Amendment absolutist, and I'll say anything. And then if someone tries to argue with me, I will start to stab them verbally. And I realized that the message is more important than the messenger. And I was yelling and screaming at these people because I believed I knew what was just and right. And whether I was destroying their argument by saying they were evil, or whether I was having a moral high ground, this did not matter, because I was not conveying a message of understanding. So making someone feel wrong and bad. And again,
Doesn't
I'll kind
make
of
you
hit that word
right.
wrong. Yeah, the NLP of wrong, it's so much weight under it. Well, it doesn't make me effective.
Right.
And see right there, I was focused on like, and I asked myself a single question, and this is kind of my guiding light, because I think even people who have a shadow, if they don't like their shadow because they have a spirit that wants to point north, but this thing inside them has real cravings, real power, but it's not evil. It's just deviant and mischievous. There are verticals that are evil, but we're not referring to the outliers. We're just talking about
Right.
your standard human, who every man in this world has the ability to take another person's life, whether it is to protect their family
Mhm.
or to verify their own safety. So that's just true. Well, I realized that it was more important to me, if I was going to spend all this time understanding what was right and true and righteous, and I was going to spend the rest of my life arguing with everyone around me who I believed was either misconstruing the truth, misunderstand the context, or trying to feel better rather than be better. And it was just like, okay, it is your responsibility. You understand that the thing that makes your information is very smart, very right, and no one can hear it. Well, you're very intelligent and always been good at explaining. You're going to have to translate. It's your responsibility. But I'm not going to lie to myself and say that this thing is not the thing that comes up with all the good arguments. But just like I said, you should just post it and not associate with it till it's all out. Guess what? Same protocol. It's always the same protocol. Freely observe creativity, get it out of you, pointedly use your intelligence or your creativity to then move something forward.
Yeah.
And I now prone my life on. I have no problem if I'm doing something out of spite, as long as my North Face and compass and my moral philosophy of I believe in private property, and I don't lie. I'm very basic. Those are the two things, and as long as that's never happening, we are kind of good. So I actively am trying to change the world, but I don't like them. My body is not a fan of people. Don't and I don't I no longer associate with the fact that that's a weird feeling and I might be an evil person because my compass only wants to give people the tools to know themselves better with financial intelligence. I don't care if the thing inside of me is evil giving me the answers. It's but it's my responsibility to convey it right and to make sure I'm always doing right and to never confuse the two. And thankfully, my compass is actually very smart through contrast. One is good at answering, one is good at noticing. And between that duality, I keep myself as narrow as I can. So
And
that
that is really, really important. So that you, folks, I don't know if you really, really heard that duality. Tristan does not have to like his customer, but he's driven to serve that customer and allow that customer the free will to take that information to wake up or not. Right. And so by not feeling responsible to, right, like, so you're not responsible for me to hear what you say. You don't say, Gail, you've got to get this. You're saying, Gail, here's the tools.
I am responsible for saying it in a way that I know you comprehend, but
Right.
I have an expectation for myself that is well beyond. But I don't want to speak, and if you couldn't hear me, I'd rather not talk. But it's because of that. It's a skill that I use throughout my life. If you're going to notice something you're good at and you're going to sharpen a blade, make sure it can be applied to many aspects of your life. And being able to convey and consider at a high level translates. But I still get very quick to starting telling people great advice. If someone compliments me 3 times, I will immediately start giving them objective advice what to do, so pointed and so because of my emotions, they'll feel a force and it's not even intended. I get excited and I'm like, and I, by the way, I know this is the best idea. The likelihood that this person knows more about any of these fields and has my level of crazy creativity, I make a lot of money selling these thoughts specifically. But when I'm randomly talking to someone and I get excited and I haven't slept, or maybe I've just had a little too much sugar, I find that I've lost my way. And I definitely don't have the steering wheel all the time. I still get caught accidentally advising people, forcing it on,
Yeah.
because I know that I could translate that message where they would beg to make that thing for themselves. Because all advice is nothing without work. Remember, knowledge is half the battle. If you took a test and only got 50%, what would your score be? You have to do more than no. You have to do more. Even if it's 10%, that's a C minus. Just get into the 60%, but
Right.
50% is a fail.
Right. Right. And I say you have to take action. One of the sayings I had years and years and years ago, because I witnessed this is based on something I've witnessed. A dream without action turns into a nightmare.
Yes.
Because what I witnessed was someone at a young age, this is the dream, this is the dream, this is the dream. And I was very young, so I'm like, oh, that's their dream. And then years come back, nothing changed in their life. And then that was always the dream, but it never happened. And it's, to me, it would have been okay to have taken the step and failed than to sit there and say, I never got the dream. You didn't even try. And so that's where meditation and the law of attraction is bullshit. You can dream it, but if you don't take action, that is part of the physical manifestation process. Even when, so I'm a big fan of the Kabbalah. Read the damn Kabbalah. There is a
Very good
point
scripture.
where it's no longer spiritual and it becomes physical.
Yes.
And then, and that's from, so there's what, 10 energy centers. So that's around number 5, right? And so that's halfway. Halfway.
Not a surprise, which by the way, half is the duality.
Yeah. Yeah. And that also at that point is where the duality of heaven and earth come in, and the abyss shows up, which is the
I'd like to
depth.
circle back on a reason to bring people's different shadows to the table that I don't think was specifically highlighted. Would that be a problem?
Not at all.
Our shadows are very motivating. If you think most of the things of art, they come with an urge. They come with a real like, I'm very okay getting work out of spite. I have more focus when I'm like, I will show you. And I think for anyone non-acknowledging, like, hey, I know you definitely don't like this. You actually almost run away from it. That's energy. Why would we not use every type of energy we have? Because again, my prefrontal cortex and my soul have decided how we're going to curate ourselves. And we are then going to validate the full support team in our minds for whatever it's best at and if it's high quality. My business clients, not my foundation, but my business clients hire me because I am unsatisfiable. It is never good enough for me, and it's why I don't manage people. My wife, once around our 15-year mark, I was having a emotional breakdown about what I was unhappy about my life and my family. They both have autism and don't have OCD. So on some level, I am a prison of two people I have to love unconditionally, but can't get to perhaps make the environment that I might need. But she throws up her arms and she's like, Tristan, you are never satisfied. And in that moment, because my mind doesn't know how to lie to itself, it was like, yes, you're right. I'm absolutely not. Although I was very angry. So I was like, and that's got nothing to do with it. But my clients hire me knowing that this will never be good enough. And they know my only solution is this. One, where did we do best? And where can we learn from our mistakes? And then two, how can we make it more efficient? The reason a lot of the things the foundation works so well is it is trying to maximize intelligence without effort, and then it's trying to be very efficient about how can we achieve it by doing the least amount. So if thinking is only half, and most people are overwhelmed, and working is even more difficult, I figure we should make it incredibly easy to think, and then facilitate how to do the least to get the most. Lazy is a thing that's a personality type. And if you don't
Yes.
acknowledge it, then you won't achieve the long-term goals. But if you're like, oh, wow, I don't ever do this, what can I do then? People
Right.
will
And I
try to
give
build.
myself permission. Again, permission is a big deal to stop and lay down, to stop and go play, to stop. So back in the day when I was a business coach, which I wasn't for very long because the spiritual and the emotional just comes in, but I had a client, what's your goal? What do you want to achieve? Laziness. I wanted to be sitting on my couch making lots of money. So what did we do? Real estate. He bought some property, rented it out. Next thing you know, he's living in a high-rise apartment, sitting in his living room, working on his computer, on his phone. Exactly what he wanted to do.
It matters.
It matters. And he was a little embarrassed. And I'm like, that's an awesome goal, right?
You'll also notice that it was the what that achieved the how. And again,
Right.
why I stress that level one, observe your nature what, and then use your prefrontal cortex later for the hows or the lower level what's. Like, these
Yep.
are the six things I do want. These are the six things I don't want. Well, these are four what's and these are the hows associated. At least it's choose your own adventure. And if you don't like it, all of these skills are needed for the other ones. So you're only going to get better and better. Or you might find out I actually want to be an employee, because that's the laziest choice. You punch a clock, you'll get paid guaranteed, but you do
Yes.
have no security. It could disappear tomorrow. So
And
start
it does.
saving. Start
And it
saving.
does. And I'll tell you, so Tristan, your approach, and I'm going to share this with people. People say, Gail, you're an excellent writer. I don't consider myself an excellent writer. I know people who are. However, if I want to write something, I literally just throw a bunch of random words that come into my mind over a couple of days. I just throw the words or a sentence or what they're on a notepad, and then I throw it into a word, and then I look at it and go, how do these things even are related to each other? Oh, well, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. Oh, look at, I have 3 paragraphs. Oh, there we go. Right. And so you're right. I don't even know how they relate. They
You
just
don't have
come
to.
into my consciousness over a couple of days. And I just throw, like today, I was that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Oh, it was Saturday. I put that note on Saturday. Holy crap. Okay. Oh, and then I had one on Monday. And then had one on Tuesday. Okay. Oh, look at this. So I've got something I'm writing about now. Right. So it
Yeah.
is definitely a what that is completely disconnected.
And the trick is to not put effort into that. That is a very observable thing. And there's the catch. We try to do it and we think there's something we have to do because we see something like, ooh, this. No, just that and that
Yes.
and that. No,
Yep.
this, just that.
Yep.
Just they're in the past tense. They'll be there later. That's why we're capturing them.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, I used to try to make something, and what would happen is it would be distasteful. So, delicious is my action word. If something
Beautiful.
doesn't feel delicious, I don't really want to do it. Why would I do something distasteful? Right. So, it wasn't delicious.
Yeah, I like that. It's like I don't agree with delicious, but you know what? I could definitely orientate myself against I
Forward.
don't want to if I'm never going to do anything that's distasteful. The side effect apex is it will be delicious. So it's not so much that I
Yes,
want something sweet. I never want to go to bed with a nasty taste in my mouth about what I bring to the world.
that's right. When I work with clients to find their word, we work with both, right? Because that mine is like, well, this tastes pretty bad, right? And so I no longer try to force. And sometimes it never gets to fruition. I don't care. Who cares?
There's fun in the journey.
Yes. Yes, because the one that I wrote 5 days later matched the one I wrote 3 months ago, connected with one that I was hoping to do 2 weeks ago. And now I have a complete picture.
And doesn't that always feel great?
And it does. And so what I love about your approach is I you say ease without effort, and I would say organic, right?
I
That
think that
it's
is the easiest thing without effort. Yeah, life just kind of grows on its own. You just kind of got to
yes,
manage a little bit of it.
yes, yes. And so you can find your organic path, the resonant path, then it's fun and and like I'm not one who's like on Tuesdays and Thursdays I have to write a post. Oh no, like sometimes I'll write a post 3 times in a day, and then I'll go a week and not say anything because I don't have something to say. Right. And so, and it's okay, guys. This is why these formula programs never worked for me. Right. They never worked for me. Um, and I found them almost, well, they were distasteful, but almost like scratching your fingernails on a wall. On the right on the chalkboard.
It's too prescriptive without diagnosis. By their nature, it's the format requires it. And if you haven't noticed, I am very, very diagnostics is really what matters. No matter what, because if the baseline data is bad, it's harder to troubleshoot the more you build on it. It becomes more abstract. You're making bigger guesses. You have got more information to miscorrelate. And again, you never know what your answer is trying to hide from you. And I say that because there seems to be a thing in our mind that's always looking for patterns, but then there's also something that's always trying to answer a question. And often, much like you say, delicious is not what I'm running towards, it's what I'm running away from. And the answer never tells you that. You're too busy listening. And think most times you find you're mid-thought. You just know the context of the thought before it became verbal or visual. Again, the internal conscious experience is unique even in that substantive way. But
Mm.
most times emotions come with words and objectivity comes with pictures because that's the way the brain is a physical thing. This isn't magic. There's a lot of quantum entanglement because of the sheer amount of neurons that are firing off electricity, but it is still just a chemical process that our brains they're all the exact same. How they're wired, how much we kick out and how much we uptake with the mix of our epigenetics, which is our personality. I don't know why I can't eat olives. It kills me, but my body says try. never successfully, I either gag or I vomit, but I love olive oil.
Hmm.
So, you know, it goes again, I'm very big on we should not associate with what we are. We should identify with it, know what we're trying to become, and use all of our intelligence to that sole purpose.
Yes, and I love that whole do not associate. And it is a pattern that is can be. I don't want to be, definitive, but it can be difficult to break out of. So, for example,
Practice.
almost 2 years ago now, I went to see my doctor, who I haven't seen in 2 years, 6 years, because I use Eastern, not Western medicine. And I ended
You'll
up,
live longer.
yes, thank you. I ended up receiving a diagnosis from the lab of stage 2 breast cancer.
When we first talked.
I never said I have. I always saw myself healthy. I immediately started doing energy work. By the way, it ended up stage 1 by the time I had surgery. And I disassociate, with the exception of one group, from any of the cancer communities. Why? I'm not a warrior. I don't go to battle with I'm not a survivor. I didn't win a war, right? Right? You're strong. I'm a human. I'm not strong. I just saw myself healthy all the time. And I used both Eastern and Western medicine. Both were right and both were wrong. There's the duality. And I wrote a book about it because both were right and both were wrong. And I had to find the mixture for me. That's what we're doing in life, finding the mixture.
And we are oil and water.
Yes.
Like our skin is made of fat. It's the reason it's hydrophobic, and our body is 80+% water. I wasn't being even an analogy. We are literally oil and water.
Right. And they don't mix. Thank goodness. I don't want my water seeping out.
Yes, I really do like my inside staying there.
Yeah, stay right where they are. Right. So Tristan, we could go on and on. I love the no association. I love this financial intelligence. It's beautiful.
Well,
Yes.
what's funny? If you're financially free, all of this conversation becomes mute. We are all required to take part in this system, and if we have to work, we're actually chained to it. I believe if everyone was financially free, we would have no enemies. We have enemies because we want, and we want because we desire, and we never think about our lifestyle. So there's a lot to that. So I just try to say financial intelligence, but men are very okay building brick houses all of their life as long as they're not surrounded by people who make them feel poor. They have nice toys, a house. Like, it is not, you don't need an infinite amount. You just need to know what you want or what you don't want. Again, way better to go with this is the bare minimum of what I will not have. All right, let's
You
work,
know,
let's save, let's do it.
I have to share another story. So I left my first husband with a daughter that was 1.5.
Oh, wow.
And the first thing I did was I went on welfare because I needed to feed her, right? And I thought, I do not want to bring her up thinking this is okay. So I went to work. So within 3 months, I was off of welfare. I made less money going to work than if I had stayed on welfare. Understand, this was not an easy choice. Within 3 years, I was a manager, I owned a home, and I had a brand new car because what I did not want. So yes, moving away from, I knew where I was going towards. So yes, there is that sub program that does need to move toward, but I knew I was moving toward that because I didn't want this lifestyle for her.
Yes, moving towards the thing that you moving towards effectively away from what you don't want is the surest way to have a high likelihood of enjoying it, even if it's the wrong target. And here's what's best: even if you're way wrong on what you're loving, you're still so far away from what you don't want. And guess what? The middle, they call it the middle way for a reason. You can live quite happy in the middle. Sometimes we're like, well, now it's not good, it's not enough, which I know I will die unhappy. if I allow myself to ask myself, are you satisfied with what you've done? I've come to terms with being okay with that. And on my deathbed, I'm not going to ask myself that. I'm going to think of things that will make me feel happy, but I'm not going to lie to myself and say I'm going to be satisfied on the. I wanted to be where I'm at now 15 years ago. I
Right.
feel 30% behind today.
Yep. And that's, was interesting because I've never been satisfied, never good enough. Um, and not from it. So it used to be, I used to beat myself up. Now it's like, it just is because, and I look at it from, because there's
Acceptance
always
is
more.
way more useful. Yes. It
Yes.
becomes a useful tool when you stop banging yourself in the head with it. These are all productive tools, but our
Right.
subconscious just uses them to beat us up. And that's
Right.
why you bring your shadows to the table.
Right.
Because listen, you're using them either way, but you're banging yourself in the head with a hammer when you could be using this thing to grind nails.
Right.
What are
Right.
we
So
doing?
shadow, what is the problem? What is it that we need to do? What is it that's making you unhappy? Right. And it's not that your father was mean to you when you were 5. And it's right. It's not those things. There's something underneath that, that the shadow for me just wants to have a seat at the table. It just wants to be seen and not a light shine on it, to seen as it is. I had a friend who gave me this fantastic analogy. Gail, if I'm in a room and I shut the light off, I can't see a thing. But if I wait long enough, my eyes adjust. And that's what sitting quietly with the shadow is about.
It takes time. It's
Yes.
not instantaneous.
Yes.
It doesn't happen over 5 minutes. It happens over time.
Over time. And it's from, I give myself love, I give myself grace, I give myself understanding, but I don't label anything anymore, because that puts it in a box that the shadow doesn't like to be in the box. Neither does ego, and neither does the light, by the way.
I find, and it'll be fun to end this on more of a contrarian point, because
Yes.
I find a lot of people really don't like labels. And when we started this, I said a good amount of words about objectivity versus subjectivity. And I find a lot of people who agree with objectivity, but actually their body has a problem with it. They allow their answerer to say, I don't label. So I hope that I can inspire you to use this tool for good, because I think in the refusing it, you're providing way too much ignorance in what's possible.
Mhm.
I always allow myself to label. In fact, and if you allow yourself to label, you actually have several different things in you that have labels. The first one will be the darkest because the limbic system is good, but then there's going to have another label of what it is or isn't, and there might be another label of what it is or isn't, and you might even have a label that's a box of contextually what these things are. Doesn't matter that, because that's not what it is. Remember, we watch first. If you took the time and then measured those, because you know who you are, I think you're not listening to your labels. I bet there's great knowledge in those labels if you allowed them to be there. And then in time, sat at the table with this label, you could learn so much more. And now it could be an empowerment rather than a scary shadow.
Oh, Tristan, I think I love you. I think I need to do some work on my label thing.
Believe it, of all my work, getting people to re-understand the use, because we all agree they're important. So most people opt to not care because they don't like its controlling nature. Don't be in the box. It's here. It's always here. And
Right.
the nature of labels, wrong is a label. We cannot live without labels. How could me and you ever have a real conversation if you refuse to label? There would be so many parts of the conversation that you physically are unable to facilitate in your mind, because without the label, we there's a bunch of context that I'm talking about, and you're saying that doesn't exist. Not, it's not true. It just doesn't exist. I, uh,
Well, you're absolutely right, because I have a brain diagram as well. And one of the things in the brain is about, bringing in information. And one of the first things you do is you put it into a label, you put it into a folder that has a label.
what a surprise. The brain wants to save a bunch of energy and not be scared by associating with, by the way, common sense says not labeling is useful as a tool in a specific moment. But often people are like, I don't even label. I once had a woman, she couldn't even identify herself as a vegetarian. I was like, then we can never have a conversation because you are just oil. You won't allow yourself to be held on. And if you can't hold on to yourself, how can you do anything with yourself? So I know I'm also a dude and we're far more objective by our very nature, and women are more subjective because they need to maintain a calm society where men are just like, nope, responsibility first. We're not going to die. Women are like, we're going to live good while we're living. So I do know there's a nature thing,
Right.
but labeling is one of the most useful things because then we can actually measure it and it doesn't change in the middle and we don't allow our bodies to have such an opinion. I hear them all. And by the way, they don't all get equal weight. They don't all get equal time. But
And they don't all have to be permanent.
well, none of them really are. That's the best part.
No, none of them are permanent.
They feel permanent, and that's why we're so scared. But like again,
Right.
I'm okay if I'm doing something out of spite. But if I'm not willing to label the reason that I'm doing it, I might actually do evil things because I know I'm being spiteful. Do you know there's a lot of things that are distasteful to do in spite? But if I'm telling myself I'm doing this altruistically, now my answer knows that it can tell me that I can do an activity and it is altruistically. I'm deceiving the compass that allows me to be a good person by letting it hide and misassociate by an unwillingness to label. So other than it hurting a little bit because we don't like the temporary feeling, I'm very pro labels. But again, they're not us. I don't ask myself I don't think of myself as do I have or am I? They are two measurements.
And I guess
two labels.
that's it. It's not the labels, it's the identifying to a label
And
that
yes.
I have an issue with. So,
Yeah. Well, again, we put ourselves in the box. No, just identify what it is and use the measuring stick. You measure yourself, you measure it, you measure yourself, and you're like, oh, these are the things that are true and useful. These are the things that are a lie. And the big ones, that's my deviant trying to play. And now that I see it, I'm never going to accidentally hurt someone.
Right. So listen, Tristan, we do need to go. I love you. So just briefly, how can someone get in touch with you if they wanted to?
If anyone finds any of this interesting or if they want to support the mission, I run a not-for-profit called thefoundproject.org. We are solely serving a community and just trying to preach this. I believe in the coming age, there are going to be a lot of small businesses and a lot of people that need financial independence, but there's a lot of money in finding them and spending the resources to short-term house and educate. And the website also does offer a bunch of free resources. So I do not believe you need money to do this and learn. However, if you have money, the benefit it could do to actually helping the people, because even if you know it all, you still need to be in that environment. And I don't expect them to figure that out first. I'm okay getting from 0 to 1. So that's it.
All the information on how to get in touch with Tristan will be in the show notes for sure. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. If this resonated with you, give us a thumbs up. If you have a question, put it in the comments. If you know someone who could benefit from this, please do share it out. And as always, subscribe so you know when the next episode is available. Thank you, Tristan.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.